Welcome to the Weights and Plates podcast. I am Robert Santana. I am your host, along with my co-host, Trent Jones.
Howdy, folks.
Today, we are going to talk about the topic of tracking, something we discuss in the context of dieting. You know, it's a common thread that comes up in pretty much a variety of settings, whether you're in this business or not.
I like how you start every episode. It's like, today, it's the weight of the modern world.
I didn't notice I did that.
Setting down on you. Tracking, man. There's so many analogies. So one of the other podcasts that I work on is You Need a Budget. It's the name of the podcast, and it's the name of the company as well that has the podcast. And it's basically that what they do at You Need a Budget is they sell a software for tracking your finances. And it's not just tracking, it's actually also, kind of giving your dollars jobs so that you essentially prepay things that are coming up in the future. But I find it funny that when you start talking about personal finance and budgeting and things like that, that food analogies work perfectly. In particular, diet analogies, when you're talking about, how much are you going to eat or how much should you eat in a given day to meet your goals. So, it's kind of it's kind of the thing that nobody wants to do, but I think it's essential for everyone to do, at least at the beginning, is to learn how to track your food and to actually get a sense of what you're eating. So we've talked about like kind of the mechanics of losing weight and particularly like recomping, like losing body fat. And what you have to do, like, it's kind of obvious, right? You've got to eat fewer calories if you want to lose weight. Okay. And then there's certain ways that we want to do that. Like, well, we don't want to skimp on protein to do that, right? We want to skimp on, maybe cut the fat out of our diet first, right? And then manipulate carbs later on, right? But the thing is, none of these strategies matter if you don't have an accurate picture of what you're eating on a day-to-day basis. And that includes the weekends, right? Part-time dieting. Yep, that includes the weekends. It's got to be a full 7 days, I think is what you said.
A week at a time, and you don't lose fat. Intra-week weights are bullshit, and yet everybody gets wrapped up in them. That's why I don't like weighing often, just gets you focused on the wrong things, and you associate that number with success or failure. And there's a fine, delicate balance there. But I like to think of tracking the same way I like to think of training wheels on a bike. Eventually they have to come off, and you just ride the bike. So it's the same concept. You're front loading yourself with work because new habits require work. I'm sorry. We're not going to skip that part. I know you want me to give you a system where you press a button, take a pill, do like one little rapid action of some sort, and you're hitting the ground running. It's not like that. You have to organize your goals first, and then create structure around how you're going to eat of some sort. Even people who eat bad have structure. They stop at Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, they go to Dunkin' Donuts. They get a couple donuts and a coffee every morning. They go to McDonald's in the afternoon and eat a bunch of shit at night. Sit on the couch eating Cheetos.
Right. I like it. You pointed that out a couple episodes ago that people have fairly limited palates when you really look at it, and we tend to fall into patterns of behavior whether we are cognizant of them or not. And that includes the people who eat poorly, right? They tend to just do the same things, just like the people who eat really well tend to just fall into a habit of doing the same things. But if you want to change your habit, if you're not eating well, you're not eating in accordance with your goals right now, and you want to change that, it's going to take some work up front.
Yeah, tracking is a way to organize what you're doing and structure it in a way that's predictable, reliable, and valid. So let's just talk about the most common tracking method, that people tend to default to. It's macros, at least in the gym business. I'd say if you were to, sample a large population of people, regardless of whether they train at a gym or not, calories are probably more popular, or carbs. I would say carbs. I'd say if you were to sample 1 million people that have done some sort of diet before and you ask them how they track, you'd probably hear carbs the most in 2022.
Yeah. Interesting. Not calories. Not
calories. I'm just guessing. I don't know if this has been asked in any type of a survey. It's an interesting question, but
you know what that makes me think of, right? When you're saying that, like, and I believe you too, right? I'm sure that people have much more awareness of their carb intake in grams or whatever than they would have 20 years ago when they'd be maybe talking just about calories.
Yeah.
The 800-pound gorilla in the room, when you say that, is that keto is like the new thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody's into keto, and you got to know how many carbs you ate if you're really going to do keto. But that's a rabbit hole. We're gonna save that one for later.
Yeah.
I'm slowly getting fired up about that.
You want to talk about that one so bad?
Oh, so bad. Like since we started this podcast, I'm like, when do we get to talk about keto?
I'd have to go back and brush up on some biochemistry. I don't want to do that right now. I know enough. I understand it pretty well. I just really don't want to go into the biochem rabbit hole today.
Yeah. But yeah, so back to macro tracking though. I think that's what we're all kind of familiar with, right? Is the idea that we have a target, or we have sort of these goals that we of how many grams of each of the big macronutrients that we're going to eat every day, and we need to track those to to know if we're making progress or not, right?
Yeah, and in terms of people that are involved in strength sports, I think macros are the most popular right now. People outside of strength sports, probably carbs. But the reason we track macros is because if you're in a strength sport or you're a strength athlete or whatever word you want to use, you have to account for performance, number one. Number two, there is a aesthetic component for a lot of people who engage in strength sports. They want to look a certain way. So the individual macros become important when you add those variables in, especially performance. If your goal is to perform at a certain level or mitigate performance losses, because remember, I've said this in other podcasts, if you are in a calorie restriction of any kind, regardless of how you shuffle up those macros, you have removed resources for recovery. And when you remove resources for recovery, you can only add so much stress, and usually not as much stress as if you have the resources for recovery. So you've essentially turned training into exercise. And, you're going to get people say, I lost weight and got stronger. Well, good for you if you did. If you pull it off, great. I'm not saying it happens this way 100% of the time. I'm saying it happens this way most of the time. And we, enough people listening to this have probably experienced it in their life. So, there's no magic formula here for, losing fat and, building muscle and getting stronger. It just tends to not happen. Even guys like, I think of Mark Bell, he's loaded up on sauce. He was a highly competitive power lifter. His best squat was 1,000. He did carnivore, lost a ton of weight, got really ripped. He held on to a good chunk of his muscle mass because he was on a bunch of drugs, but he's not as strong as he was when he was a fat guy. He'll be the first to admit that,
Right. Yeah.
And you see this all the time, when power lifters go down weight classes. Sometimes they, Ed Cohen was strongest at 220, but he went up to 242. And, that happens, but it's not always the case. More often than not, you see people drop a significant amount of weight, the performance follows. So how do you want to approach that? Number one, first you have to accept that it's most likely going to happen unless you're a novice. The less novice you are, the more muscle mass and strength reduction you're going to experience in a weight loss phase. So that's why a lot of guys tend to stay in the same weight class and don't oscillate as much as they get more and more advanced. You watch bodybuilders, their body weight doesn't change that much year to year at the Olympia, these top guys. And, drugs aside and all that, what we're talking about here is how you have guys that have reached ceiling effects. Whether they're on drugs or not, the amount of time and progressive overload that they've put their body through has put them into an advanced status. They're scraping for, fractions of a pound of muscle at this point. So if you look at them year to year, they weigh about the same. Ronnie weighed about the same in the last few years that he competed. Arnold weighed about the same in most of his competitions. If you look at power lifters, they tend to stay in a weight class, the more advanced they get. This swinging around body weight, you don't see it as much. Now you see people doing silly shit like competing in federations that have 24-hour weigh-ins, and they might, pretty much the 181 class is really the 220 class.
Right, yeah. So people can make these like ridiculous swings of body weight. Some people can. Some people can.
Yeah, so if you want to know how strong you should be and you're looking at those types of sports and those types of records, subtract 20 to 30 to 40 pounds from the weight class you're looking at, and you'll find the guys that are about your size,
Right.
So for me, that's probably the 148s.
That's I can't even fathom cutting down to that.
I don't think you can.
It's crazy.
I think the lower weight classes, they don't lose as much, but it's still quite a bit.
There's no way. Yeah. So that's the thing, and it works the other way too. So you're talking about losing weight, right? And why you need to pay attention to your macros if you are trying to lose weight and lose body fat. But it works the other way too. If you are skinny fat and you need to gain muscle, or maybe you're just underweight and you need to gain muscle and just body weight in general, then you need to pay attention to your macros because, because training, the stimulus of training, especially barbell training, heavy barbell training, causes us to partition the food that we eat, right? The calories that we eat in different ways, right? Than somebody who's not trained. So somebody who is training heavy with the barbell lifts is going to be able to utilize protein to build muscle mass in a way that somebody who doesn't train at all won't. So even if you're on the other side of the equation and you need to gain weight or you just need to gain muscle, right? Then you need to be tracking your macros in some way because you need to be eating a sufficient amount of protein to drive that muscle growth. And
there you go.
Also, you need a sufficient amount of carbohydrates to ensure that you have enough energy on hand to actually do the workouts and get through the workouts without dying, right? So, so there's a reason why we just don't eat we don't just say you need 4,000 calories and just go, right? It might work, but it may not be very optimal either.
Yeah, and I've said that before. Rip gives that kind of advice, because it's just simple enough, and the assumption is they'll, eat most of everything. And if you're a guy who's $130, then it's probably going to be fine. And a lot of the times it really is fine for those guys. But then other times, what I end up seeing is, I got to eat 4,000 calories. I want to chew all that food. So then they start eating nuts and fat and not getting enough carbs, So I've seen that happen.
Right. Ice cream. And
why is my squat the only thing that's going up? Because you've used all of your carbs to squat. I mean, not literally. I'm oversimplifying. It's not actually what happens when you're squatting. But typically they'll blow through all their fuel when they're squatting, and then nothing else goes up. I've seen that happen many times with the guys who just get fat eating it the wrong way. So what is the right way? We just talked about it. You want to have enough protein. You want to have enough carbs. And if you have to gain weight, then, you need enough fat. If you're trying to minimize weight gain or lose weight, then, you scale back on the fat. But that's why we worry about that. But that's one way to track, right? So you look at the food labels, you look at the amounts per serving, the serving size, and you portion out what you need, etc. So that's method number one, macros, right? And then all those macros add up to calories. So for those of you listening who are confused about this and you say, oh, what about calories, because calories in, calories out. Yeah, each one of those macros has a caloric density. So carbs, 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, and protein, 4 calories per gram of protein, and fat, 9 calories per gram of fat. Alcohol, I'd say 7 calories per ml or gram. MLs and grams are equivalent of alcohol. So, all those macros add up to something. And if you're eating consistent, then it doesn't really matter what the calorie level is as long as you're eating similar calories day to day, right? Then you can just adjust them depending on the goal, right? Up if you want to gain, down if you want to lose, or stay the same if you're good. So that's pretty simple. So what about just counting calories, Well, that's what people used to do in the 90s. Everybody was looking at calories and fat, which isn't a bad way to look at it if you're not training, But,
right, yeah.
I'm not totally against that, but protein's important whether you're training or not. We've learned that since. But Calories are just where you look at the label, you see the calories, and then you just record those and don't worry about where the macros are coming from. Sounds simple enough, and sure, if you keep your calories low, you lose weight. If you keep your calories high, you'll gain weight. But if you're trying to lose weight and you just track calories and you're getting it all from carbs and fat, you might lose more muscle mass than you want to. So, generally don't recommend that. You should always track protein regardless of what your physical activity situation is. But calorie counting can be very useful when you have to eat out, because when you eat out, you can't estimate fat. You have no idea what that cook put in that food, in terms of fat.
Yeah.
You can estimate protein if you get really good at, if you're weighing your meats a lot, you can kind of eyeball it after a while. Same thing with your carb sources and your vegetable sources, etc. But you just can't track the fat. So what do, right? You're going to go eat a meal out, and let's say you're on a diet, you're trying to, lose weight, or let's say you're trying to, not get fat when you're gaining weight, because that's a problem too. These guys, they eat the right stuff during the week, and then their meals out are so huge that they end up gaining too much body fat, because they're out eating, a whole pizza and things like that, right? On top of their normal 5,000 calories a day, or 4,000 or 3,000 or whatever, depending on the person. But calories can be very useful because, for instance, if I go out to eat, these habits are pretty much embedded at this point. I didn't grow up around a lot of junk and, calorically dense foods. They were considered luxuries, so eating, what people consider a quote unquote healthy diet, which is really like a low fat, high fiber diet, high protein too. That's normal for me. So when I go to a restaurant, my assumption is I'm getting 3 meals out of this plate. So I only need 1 the rest of the day. And I'm probably getting double the fat that I need, maybe a day's worth of it. So, or more, So I'm just going to keep my carb. I'm going to go keto for my 1 meal.
Right.
Maybe have some fruit, for some carbs, so I don't get low blood sugar. And then I'm going to go out to eat, and, I'm going to have a full course meal. And that usually works. I do that no matter what. Like, it tends to work out well because I'm pretty aware of, my body cues and if I'm too full and whatnot. And if I eat like 4 meals and go to a restaurant and eat a typical restaurant meal, I'm going to be so full. I'm going to go to bed full. It doesn't feel good,
Oh, yeah. That's like Louis C.K. He would always say, the meal's not over when you're full. The meal is over when you hate yourself.
Yeah, fuck that.
That's that point.
I don't.
Yeah. So what you're saying is basically like, if you know you're going out to eat and you're going to have a big meal for dinner, then you might look at it from a calorie perspective.
I purely look at it from a calorie perspective. You're not balancing macros if you're going to a pizza joint.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you might say for that meal that you eat, you might eat 1 meal during the day prior to the dinner. And let's say that that your sort of baseline is 2,800 calories, right? That's what you need to eat just to stay the same, right? More or less. So you would eat, let's say, 800 calories for your 1 meal during the day, knowing that what you're going to eat for dinner is probably going to be on the order of about 2,000 calories.
Probably.
If it's a real big one or whatever.
I mean, in my brain, I'm like, best case scenario, it's 1,000. Worst case scenario, it's 2,000. We'll plan for the worst. So
yeah.
And then let's say that it ends up being 1,000 and I ate 800. Okay, I had 1,800 calories one day. That's not going to fuck up my training,
Right. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And you probably, that would self-correct anyway. You'd probably go home and have a little extra.
Yeah, and I'll tend to eat more the next day. I mean, I'm not hungry, and my blood sugar's not dropping, and I'm not dizzy, so it tends to work. The meal tastes better too because I go in there nice and hungry,
Yeah, right.
But
yeah, that's it. I like that. I like that strategy. Actually, you mentioned that in a article or a podcast years ago, and I've started doing that since then. If I know I'm going out to a big dinner, then I'll usually only eat 1 meal. Maybe I'll have like that small meal and like a protein shake or something. Just make sure I'm hitting my protein numbers, and it works pretty well.
The challenging thing today is that we have a first world problem of too much food.
Yeah.
Historically we're seeking it out because it was scarce. Which is again why I'm not worried about this strategy. We didn't eat 5 or 6 times a day throughout history, no matter what the research journals want to tell you. In fact, they all contradict each other on this topic. I think it's mostly bro science that, you eat every couple hours. It's superior for fat loss, superior for blood sugar, this, that, and the other. The blood sugar thing kind of makes sense, but I don't think you need to eat 6 times. You eat 3 times, you're probably going to get some nice glucose and insulin curves, and people are so different with that. It's just
right.
like, come on. Like,
bro, you got to have a steady stream of protein into the muscles at all times.
It's a distraction. I'm hungrier too because I'm eating often, and then I'm distracted. I can't work continuously. I mean, historically, we probably ate, 2 to 3 times a day in past history. So, sure, you fast one day, essentially, is what we're talking about. Not like a true 8 to 12-hour fast, but you're just going longer without food. Ain't going to fuck you up, You're going to be fine. So, I'm fine with that. I just assume that when I go to, let's say I go to a steakhouse, if I get a steak, a carb, like potatoes or whatever, and vegetable, which is usually doused in oil, and have a drink, probably getting 2,000 calories, maybe even 2,500. So I might just have an omelet for breakfast that day,
Yeah. So I don't think people. So here's this kind of getting to the heart of why we're doing this whole episode on tracking in the first place. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people understand the magnitude. And I've said this before.
No, there's a huge mismatch between volume of food and caloric content of food.
Right. Like, I don't think most people realize that when they go out to dinner. Like, if you just ask people, like, walking out the door of the, Mexican joint or whatever, like, what did you have today? It's like, oh, I had the chimichanga. They're like, did you have any, like, drinks? It's like, oh, yeah, I had a Dos Equis. And you're like, well, how many calories did you eat tonight? And it's some wild guess. I doubt most people would get even close to the number of calories they actually ate. That would be my guess.
No, I don't think so.
I think this is a big deal, right? Because we're talking about if you don't have accurate records of what you're doing, like if you're not tracking accurately, you can miss by such a large margin that you undo the progress that you've made, right? So if you've been in a 200 to 300 calorie a day deficit all week, and then Saturday you miscount your calories by 1,000, you've you've essentially undone all of the work that you've done that week, reducing your calories, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal, right? It's like this is why you have to track at least a little bit in the beginning, because you need to understand and have just sort of a nice mental, like some rules of thumb of how many calories are in the food that you're eating, and what's the macro content. When it's knowable, right? And understanding, like you said, at restaurants, sometimes it's just not knowable, like the fat thing. But you can at least have a rule of thumb, like you said, like, it's probably going to be between 1,000 and 2,000 calories. Well, there you go. You can plan around that now.
This conversation just inspired me to. I'm gonna get some takeout and send the food out to this lab and get the information.
Oh yeah. Can you just do that? Can you just find a lab and have them burn it up and measure it?
I mean, I think it's.
Well, I mean, maybe you can. That's.
I was going to say. I mean, it's America. The technology's there. Somebody wants to make money off it, right? I want to get like some of the most common things, like pizza, like hamburger joint, Mexican food.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think the combined stuff is probably the more interesting thing, because it's like, it's not that hard to look up a donut and be like, well, you can look up 4 different donuts in the nutrition facts and kind of like, triangulate to what it's going to be. But yeah, the combo platter, with the 2 beef tacos and the cheese enchilada with rice and beans on the side, that's what matters.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, when you're ordering food out at a restaurant, and I'm not talking about McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or one of these, chains that have their macros posted. I'm talking about a mom and pop restaurant that, serves you a full course meal, right? There is a mismatch between the volume of food and the calories in the food. So, I remember when I worked in dialysis, the patients say, well, I don't even eat that much. And like, there's a bag of Cheetos sitting there. And, the volume of food they're telling me the truth. They're not eating that much volume, right? So you may not be eating that much volume, but you are definitely eating that many calories. And the problem there is that fat is the invisible macro. I call it the undercover macro. So you might get, steak and vegetables at a steakhouse and get 2,000 calories. because of all the fat. And it's like, well, I
Yeah.
cut the fat off the side. Well, there's this thing called marbling. It's intramuscular fat,
Right.
and that's still fat, and it tastes delicious, but it's fat. And then the cook probably cooked that in a cast iron skillet with butter.
Oh, yes, undoubtedly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just do the math here. Let's say you get something like, I don't know, a ribeye, right? And typically they're not going to give you 4 ounces at a steakhouse. You're usually going to get around 16. So let's say you get a 16-ounce ribeye. I'm going to estimate here, and then I'll look it up after I estimate. I'm going to say that there's probably, 100 calories per ounce. So it's 1,600 calories. So now let's look up a ribeye.
Okay. I've got one here. Yeah, I'll see. We'll see what
Let's pick a
see
random
what we
one,
both
yeah.
work out.
All right.
Okay, this is just straight off Google, right? Ribeye steak, 16 ounce.
Mm-hmm.
You want the calories first?
Yeah.
Okay, 1,320 calories.
That wasn't too far off.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close. Yeah, it's almost like 90 calories per ounce there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you the fat last. So protein. So if you eat the whole thing, that's 108 grams of protein.
I believe I could probably predict the fat too.
Okay. 0 carbs, obviously. What do you think the fat is?
Probably, I'd say probably about 115-ish, give or take.
Okay, so they're saying 98 grams of fat.
Yeah, I'm not too
but
far.
there might be, that might be. I don't know. Sometimes here's the interesting thing, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit here. So I'm going to sit here and do the math on this. So if I do 108 grams of protein times 4 calories, right? Because there's 4 calories per gram, like you said, that's 432 calories. And then I go 98 grams of fat times 9 calories. That's 882 total calories from fat plus the 432 from protein. Okay, that adds up to 1,314. So it's pretty close to the total calorie
pretty
number.
close, yeah.
Many times I have, on various nutrition labels, I have individually added up the macros, and it's far enough off from the total calorie number that so I've seen 50 and 100 calorie differences there, and it's like, what's going on here? So
do you see what I mean? So that's just one item on the
right, yeah. We haven't gotten to the salad that's loaded with cheese and oil. Right.
Yeah. So 1,600 calories just from the meat. Now, I know not everybody listening is getting a 16-ounce ribeye. I'm just giving one example of a popular item that people order. So, but I only had the green beans with it. Yeah, and it had like 5 tablespoons of olive oil in it. Let's just be nice and say 3. That's another 420 calories. So you're already at 2,000 calories just from. I just ordered the meat and vegetables, and you're at 2,000 calories. And then you're going to have a drink or two. If let's say if you're having 80 proof, which I know most of you aren't, it's probably 130 calories or 120 calories. And then you're having 2, so you're at 250. So you're already at 2,250. If you make that a cocktail, you're probably at 2,500. And that's still, we have not included a salad or a dessert.
Yeah.
But you just had steak and vegetables and just 2 drinks. Yeah, 2,500 calories, buddy,
Right.
Let's take something else like salmon. Salmon's a, pretty healthy food.
Yes.
And it's high protein, but it's also high fat, but it's good fat, but it still has grams of fat, which have 7 calories for each one of those, right? So typically they're going to give you a 6-ounce salmon, and my guess is it probably has, say 30 grams of fat maybe in a 6-ounce. What do you think?
I'm just looking it up here. Very close. Yeah. So 6-ounce salmon. This is giving me 3 ounce, but I'll just double it. 22 grams of fat, it says.
Yeah. So it's like a medium fat meat. It's not quite as high as a ribeye,
Yep.
So
34 grams of protein.
Yeah. And that's great, right? So you have 22 grams of fat out the gate, but they're cooking that in butter. So
yeah, right.
What do you want to do? 3 servings of butter, so 3 tablespoons of butter. Is it a quart? What's the serving of butter?
I feel like normally, we could do butter, but I feel like normally you'd even use olive oil, which is even fattier.
Olive oil doesn't have the high smoke point. Wouldn't they use canola?
Yeah. Oh no, you got to use avocado oil, right? Isn't that the?
Oh, that's great for cast iron. Did I talk to you about this already, or are you just bringing that up?
No. I mean, I've known that just because we cook with cast iron all the time here.
You watch Cowboy Rollins.
Oh no,
that's where I learned.
Do I need to?
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
should. We're gonna plug Cowboy Rollins here. He doesn't need us to plug him, but we're gonna plug him. Great cast iron guy. So let's see here. You know that a quarter cup of butter, I've never measured in cups, so I never thought about it, but it's not surprising. It has 46 grams of fat and 407 calories.
dang, yeah, I believe it. I believe it.
But they don't do it like that. Usually they'll do what? So each tablespoon of butter has about 100 calories. And my guess is if they're cooking a piece of salmon with it, I mean, all fats pretty much same amount per serving once you liquefy them.
Yeah.
So you're probably looking at like 200 to 300 fat calories right there. And that's just me being generous. It could be more. We don't know what the hell these cooks are doing. Usually they just want it to not stick to the damn pan, so they'll just douse the damn pan with fat. And then you don't know how much of it goes into the meat, how much of it evaporates, how much of it goes into the pan. So let's just call it 300 calories, right? So what did we say for the salmon? You said it was like 23 grams of fat. What was the calories?
So 22 grams of fat and 34 grams of protein. And the total calories was 350.
Yeah, so 350. So you're already getting 600 to 700 calories just from the salmon. And then let's say you get the vegetables. So you get asparagus. You're like, well, it's just asparagus. There's nothing in there. Yeah, but then they're adding probably a couple tablespoons of olive oil. So you're getting another 200 to 300 calories, maybe more. So you're already at 1,000 calories just from salmon and asparagus. And let's say you're female and your calorie needs are 1,500, which is not an uncommon calorie need for a lot of females.
Right. Yeah.
And or even 1,800. Let's be generous. Let's talk about female who trains. So you're already at, what is that, like 2/3 of your calories for the day?
Yeah, at least
50. More than like half almost.
Yeah, 350 for the salmon alone.
Yeah.
Plus the butter in the salmon, which we added. What do we say? Another 400 for that?
Yeah,
let's just say 300.
Yeah.
Plus the asparagus on the side, which is another.
Well, just exclude the vegetable calorie content and be nice.
Yeah, it's negligible,
so
right?
You're getting like,
so it's about like you said, it's about 1,000 calories when you add that all up. So that would be 2/3 of your caloric needs. Yeah,
because I'm at
if you're a female.
Yeah, I'm at 55% for the salmon and the asparagus. Let's say you have a salad. Let's say you have a salad and you don't get cheese and nuts and raisins on it. You just get vegetables, right? You're gonna and let's say you're having a dressing.
Right.
And let's say you get it on the side and you're dipping it in there, right? But let's say you have half of it, so you're getting another 150 calories, or you're probably at 1,100 to 1,200 calories just from that meal. And then you're going to have a glass of wine, which is another 130-ish. So you're getting up there. You're almost at like 100% of your calories for the day. And let's say you split a dessert, right? The dessert's probably 500 calories or 400 calories just for the dessert. Let's say you split it, that's 200. I mean, you're going to hit that. You're going to hit a day's worth of calories at a restaurant quite easily. And from a volume standpoint, you really didn't eat that much. You're telling me the truth when you say that. I believe you. You didn't eat that much food, because you didn't, but you ate a lot of calories.
Yeah.
This is why I say don't attempt to balance macros if you're going out to eat. Just view it from a caloric standpoint and assume you are getting somewhere, and you can judge based on your estimated calorie needs if you know them. But you're getting somewhere from 50 to 100% or more of your calories in a single meal,
Yeah, I like that. That's I think that really drives the point home when you sit here and do the math. Yeah. And so here's the thing, like this information is if you just spend a few minutes on Google, that's all I'm doing is just type in like name of food and then nutrition facts after it, and you can find this stuff pretty easily now. Mm-hmm. You'll get competing, especially if you're looking at stuff that like salmon and these sort of like single ingredient foods are pretty easy to find. But if you're looking at stuff that's pre-prepared, if you're like, well, what about a bagel or something like that? Mm-hmm. Well, you'll get conflicting data depending on what bagel you look up, right? Because there's different sizes and different formulations and all that kind of stuff. But you can pretty easily triangulate and figure out the average of the stuff that you're eating, when you're going out and indulging at a restaurant, or if it's just, you're having some snacks around the house or something. So I think it's a pretty useful exercise to just get some facts and figures in your head that are references for you.
I mean, I just, as you were talking, I pulled up another one. So I'm thinking about the ribeye, right? So I'm like, let me just look at a recipe. If somebody,
You gonna get a ribeye this weekend now?
I don't. It's too damn chewy. I don't. It's not the. Yeah. It's not the kind of fat that like
That 16-ounce ribeye nowadays, it might cost you $100 nowadays.
It might. Oh, shit. Valentine's Day's coming up. We go to a steakhouse for that. I order steak. She orders. I don't know what she orders. I think she got salmon last time. But let's take a look here. I'm gonna crunch this recipe real quick.
Okay.
Now this is a website with a recipe listed, and the visual of it matches that which I would see at a steakhouse. Now, there's probably going to be variations in how various cooks and chefs make this, but I think we're probably going to fall into a range of a typical steakhouse. It's a pretty good experiment. I don't know why I hadn't done this before. Now, we got a bunch of spices in here. I'm not going to count those because garlic doesn't have anything, thyme doesn't have anything, rosemary doesn't have anything. So in this one, they're doing a 24-ounce ribeye. So the ingredients, 1 24-ounce ribeye, 2 inches thick at room temperature. Salt or ground pepper, canola oil, unsalted, 1 tablespoon of canola oil, 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2,274 calories for that steak.
Okay.
Now it says 3 to 4 servings. So if you divide it into 3, I've never seen an 8-ounce ribeye on the menu is the thing,
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're going to typically see like 8-ounce filet mignon.
Definitely not a
12-ounce.
Yeah, not a 6-ounce ribeye with the 4 servings. Yeah, right. So that's the thing. So it's like as a practical matter. Oh yeah, in theory, okay, if you divide that by 4, you're looking at 500 to 600 calories. But when have you seen a 6-ounce ribeye on the menu?
Right.
That's so you have a problem. It's just a practical matter. It's going to be anywhere from 16 to 24 ounces. Yeah, so you see it adds up real quick, and then you're like, oh, I don't eat that much, And it was, the one I hear the most, another one that I hear a lot is, oh, well, it's all protein. Well, no, it's not all protein.
Yeah, we just showed you 100 grams of fat.
Yeah, I trimmed.
It's actually half fat.
I trimmed the fat off the side. Well, there's fat in the muscle too. There's fat in your muscles. Intramuscular fat is a thing. That thing called marbling.
Yeah. Right.
There's fat there, and it was also cooked in fat, as we just discussed. So no, you didn't just eat protein, and when you have liquor, well, it's not that I just drank straight liquor. Well, alcohol is almost as calorically dense as fat. So, liquor and beer. Depends if you like volume or if you like something sharp and quick. But if you're drinking a 12-ounce beer or having a 1.5-ounce shot, you're consuming the same number of calories, more or less. I mean,
right.
We're excluding high gravity stuff. Just a basic, commercial beer or 80-ounce spirit. Not a barrel proof. The numbers do get higher then, obviously. So.
Yeah, your 15% Belgian quad it's not what we're talking about.
No,
here.
We're talking about what is Miller Genuine Draft versus a Jack Daniel's shot,
Yeah.
Neither of which I drink, I tend to go with 90 proof bourbon or barrel proof, and I understand the calories are higher.
You don't like the champagne of beers?
No.
That's what you're saying?
I mean, if I want to pretend I'm king of the hill for the day, maybe. I like doing that sometimes. I just don't have an alley to sit on. And that's
some Duff beer. No, that's the Simpsons.
That's the Simpsons. Well, he drinks that in the house. Hank Hill drank it. Well, I guess he did it on the front porch, right? It wasn't always in the alley.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I have an appreciation for that sometimes. So maybe I need to get some cheap beer, but. Typically, I like an IPA. If I'm drinking beer, I like the hops. And if I'm drinking bourbon, I tend to go 90 proof or higher. So it's higher calorie. But, for those of you who just drink regular stuff and don't give a shit, most, commercial whiskey is probably 80 proof,
Yeah.
And most beer is like 3 to 5%.
So, and the other thing.
It's alcohol by volume, right? So think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I always like to point out here is that, I don't know about you, but I know that if I'm having a couple cocktails, my decision-making matrix for what I'm going to order after dinner
is
significantly altered. Like I'm going to have
You just
that
reminded me.
chocolate cake, But I might not have ordered it. Had I not had the cocktails, I might have been like, I don't really want the cake tonight. I'm just going to have the steak. Nope. If I have 2 cocktails, I'm getting the cake, right? So it kind of naturally follows. Like if you get the cocktails, it's not going to be the only thing. Yeah. So there you go. I think that illustrates the point pretty nicely that you got to have a handle on your calories, in sort of a rough number if you're going to eat out. And also, B, if you're trying to lose weight, stop eating out. It's not going to work very well for you.
No.
Just stop it.
I mean, if you can stop it, that makes it a lot easier, Yeah,
it really does. And when I say stop it, I mean go like once a month or something. Like you don't have to deprive yourself utterly, but if you're going to the steakhouse once a week, it's just not going to work. I'm sorry,
it's not going to work.
Just look at the math here. So I do want to ask something here. Let's kind of pivot back towards macro tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And are there some pitfalls to macro tracking that you see? So like obviously restaurants,
that's the obvious one,
a pitfall, right? That's the obvious one. But what about just kind of day-to-day food stuff that you'll be preparing, in your own kitchen for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Are there any downfalls to tracking macros versus maybe, I guess the other sort of third strategy that we haven't mentioned yet? We've got macro tracking, we've got just calorie tracking. Mm-hmm. And I guess the third strategy is some sort of like intuitive eating, where essentially you don't track, but you're by force of habit, you are naturally going to gravitate towards the right balance of macros for your goals.
Sure.
So that's kind of like an implied third strategy, I guess, that we haven't really explicitly mentioned. But are there any downsides to tracking your macros? Because I know some people that have I can think of a few, but I'm curious, what do you think about this?
I think there are downsides to tracking anything because humans like to eat in units. We want to grab what's available and eat it. And when you're glued to a smartphone app, or if you're doing it the old-fashioned way and writing it down, it's interrupting your day constantly. You have to stop and do this. There's another task you have to do. And that's why I say it's training wheels. Like when I go and eat, I know I need a lean protein, a vegetable, carb source of some sort, like a fruit or a starch, and I might throw fat in there, like avocado or something, and I typically know that I need that when it's time to eat, and that's just from years of doing this. I used to track diligently, and then eventually I'm like, why am I doing this? I know what I need to eat, and that's how it goes. When I go out to eat, like I said, I know I'm eating once, and then I know when I go out, I'm going to order what I want, and I'm going to pay attention to how full I get, because, the thing about fat is fat gets you full. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yes.
If you start getting full at a restaurant, you're probably satisfied, But I think that when people start freaking out because, I went over my carbs and went under my fat, or went over on my fat and then blew my calories out, they get real neurotic about trying to get it perfect and get the numbers to line up. You got a problem now, and I don't, the purpose of macros is to teach you how to, teach you how to keep track of your food, provide structure, right? The purpose of it is not for you to eat for numbers, There's a margin of error there, you want to build structure. So what you were talking about with intuitive eating, part of that requires a certain level of knowledge, because you want to eat the right things. If you eat intuitively and you just, I'm just going to eat when I'm hungry, but you're eating sugar every time, then you're always hungry, right?
Right.
You want to have some level of knowledge, and that's where like the meal plan method comes out. And I look at meal plans as like a blueprint, right? Like, okay, I'm going to eat generally around these times, and I'm going to generally eat this combination of foods, like the example I gave a few moments ago. And then you just kind of follow that. You carry that out, whether, you're just me, I put them together as I go along. But there was a time where when I used to go into campus, when I was a doctoral student in my first year, I would put all these containers together, and I had a 6-pack bag, and there were ice packs around it. And I'd heat them up in the microwave and eat them. And it worked. I don't like the container life personally. So I try to get things like instant rice, eat more fruit, just try to minimize how much I have to heat things up, because I just don't enjoy it as much. But back then it was fine. And I just knew it was time to eat at certain times of the day. And it gave me a routine. And then, I've followed a version of that ever since. I've just continued to follow that for years and years and years. I know that I need a lean meat, either a starch or a fruit, or sometimes both, depending on what's available, and a vegetable. I used to do the whole, I'm going to eat more carbs when I lift and less carbs away from the workout, but I want a big ass breakfast, and I'm not going to compromise that. So, I wake
Right.
up in the morning and I have a ton of carbs, and I don't train till the afternoon, and it's fine. I've lost weight that way. I've gained strength that way. I just like waking up in the morning and having a big breakfast.
Yeah.
So
Same here.
yeah, no. So when you do a meal plan, again, a goal is not to eat for numbers; it's to construct a system, to build a structure for yourself that you can stick with. Let's say you're a school teacher. These they have pretty rigid schedules. I've worked with them before many times, and you're going to probably be able to slip in a quick breakfast because you got to get to school early enough, since classes typically start between 7 and 9, depending on the school district. And you're not going to be able to eat till maybe noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
Right.
So let's say your first meal's at 6 in the morning, and you're just going to, have a protein shake or some yogurt and fruit because you got to run out the door and get to work by 7 to teach class at 8. So you might not eat till 1. That's, 7 hours. It's not the end of the world. Like I said, I think personally the 3 meals a day and then maybe a protein shake around workouts or before bed works pretty good because you're not worried about food all the time. I find when I eat more frequently, I'm hungrier. And it's an anecdotal thing that I've heard from many people. I'm not, trying to make a academic argument about that. I'm just saying that as a practical matter, people report, there are people that have reported they tend to be hungrier when they eat more. So anyways, school teacher eats at 6, just a small, quick, easy meal, might say, hey, blend that into a protein shake or something like that, And then they're not going to eat for 6 hours because they have to teach classes. Think about it. Remember when you're in elementary school, when do you think your teacher's going to be able to leave the classroom to, go get food, right?
Yeah, right.
So you might go 6-7 hours and eat, and then they might go straight to the gym so that they don't skip it if they go home first. And that's when a protein shake can be useful, possibly Gatorade, depending on what type of activity they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then they go home and have dinner, and that's it. Three meals, 1 shake, maybe a second one before bed if they tend to get hungry later at night. But that's a meal plan for you, right? And then you just kind of pick foods that work, that you can kind of do every day. Like I said, we're creatures of habit. When the habits tend to veer off is when, let's say, our school teacher has a day off, Saturday, Sunday. Now she, has to run errands all day Saturday. She might have a bigger breakfast because she has time to cook. Might do an omelet or something. Maybe some oatmeal, something that she doesn't have time for during the week. Then she's going to go run around all over town, catching up on things. And then, might stop at a restaurant and get something to eat, whether it's, somewhere that's takeout, not necessarily fast food. I don't think everybody eats fast food, but say, stop somewhere to get something, something in between a, full out steakhouse and a McDonald's, something in between, like a Chipotle maybe,
Yeah.
Or more common, a dessert, I'm just going to go out for ice cream on the weekend, I'm going to have a glass of wine. These are some of the things I hear as a dietitian. And that's where, the calories tend to skew. So where our teacher may be eating, let's say it's a female teacher. Let's say she's eating 15 to 1,800 calories during the week. Then on Saturday, she puts down 2,500 because she, woke up, had a bigger breakfast, then went out and, had some Dairy Queen, had some Chipotle, then sat down, had a glass of wine, watched a movie on Saturday night if she had time,
Yep. Right.
So,
right.
All that adds up. It's a lot more than what she's eating during the week. And then she might replicate something similar on Sunday. So then you have 2 days of surplus, 5 days of deficit. Best case, you have net maintenance, but in some cases, you have a net surplus.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why we see, commonly people year over year just get a little bit fatter, just very slowly. I think most people that get to be overweight and with too much body fat, and especially obese, it tends to happen slowly. Mm-hmm. It takes years to get to that point.
Oh yeah,
and that's right there how it happens. I think we have a very recent example of this in a that's kind of magnified, and that's the COVID lockdowns.
Oh yeah.
It's like, think about, like, it disrupted everyone's schedule, right? Disrupted everyone's habits. All of a sudden you're home more, so you have more opportunities to snack or prepare foods or prepare that bigger breakfast and lunch and dinner. And then you layer on top of that a lot of fear and stress, and which probably drove, more food consumption. That would be my guess. But yeah, so there you go, right? And like, how many people gained a bunch of weight during COVID? During the COVID lockdowns. It's a lot of people.
Yep.
And so there you go, right? You can just see how disrupting the habit alone changes the calculus quite a bit.
We're creatures of habit. And, if your structure changes, you got to add a new structure. When my weekend rolls around, lately it's been the same as the weekdays, so I'm working so damn much. But when I was going out more, I knew that, like, me and Christy would go out and get pho or something, right? So
Yeah.
I'd have my usual breakfast, but, typically my breakfast consists of vegetable omelet, make it on cast iron with avocado oil spray.
Yes.
And because then
For the high smoke point.
oh yeah, and it doesn't stick either. So then I'll do that, and then I'll have a oatmeal cooked in ultra filtered milk, and I'll throw a banana in there. Sometimes I have a second one if I'm still hungry. So it's I've probably 1,000 calories or something. I haven't actually calculated. I don't track anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty satisfied. I don't have to think about food till like noon. And I wake up around 6, 7. So I do that on Saturday, but then, I'll just go about my day and I won't make myself anything else. And then I'll go get pho. We get rice noodles, and she gets that tofu, the fried tofu. It pairs well. I'm not a big tofu guy, but that's the one dish that I have with it because it just pairs well.
It just works. It's like Thai food, if you get Thai curry, it's like the tofu's pretty good in curry. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll get
It has a good mouthfeel.
It does. So yeah, we typically get that, and then we'll get spring rolls and peanut sauce. So, I know I'm getting probably, 1,000 calories there, maybe more. The noodles are, pretty high calorie because it's a lot of carbs,
Right.
You get a lot of volume, So I haven't actually tried to calculate it, but, there's fat in the broth, there's noodles, the noodles are the one carb source that can really add a good chunk of calories, because, man, it seems like you could get a good amount of calories with a small volume of food. So, like, you ever seen a serving of pasta? It's sad, and it's like 200 calories,
Right. Yes. Yeah.
They like,
it packs densely.
Yeah, those carbs are densely packed, probably because they grind it. I think bread's the same way. When you grind up the flour, you can pack the volume so densely and get all those carbs in such a small portion,
Right. Yeah. It doesn't fluff up like rice or.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's why I like fruit. But like the noodles alone, you're probably getting several hundred calories from when you're doing that. Then there's fat in the broth, and there's fat in the tofu that's naturally there, and then there's also fat from the way they fry it.
Yeah.
Then the spring rolls themselves aren't the ones we get aren't that fatty. We get the shrimp one, but I get the tofu one too, which has its extra fat calories as well. So. I'm probably getting, a 4-figure calorie meal there. I don't know that I'm getting up to 2,000 though, probably 1,000, to 1,500 range if I had to guess. And then, have like my 1,000 calorie breakfast and I'm good,
There you go.
And that's for one day. When I'm like eating a proper day's worth of meals, probably getting 3,000 calories most of the time,
Yeah. Right.
I'll err on the side of caution. If I'm going to a restaurant, I'm like, I'm going to undereat today and it's fine, because I'm going to eat normal tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, like, to bring this full circle, right? The way that I think you approach nutrition and macros or calories or however it is in your particular circumstance that you're tracking this is that you kind of work backwards. You're like, am I achieving the goal that I set out to achieve? Mm-hmm. If yes, you like by definition you ate what you needed to,
right?
Right? Like,
oh yeah.
If you have a body composition that is acceptable to you and your goals, and your performance is good, and you're meeting your goals, then it's fine. There's really I don't think you need to tweak too much from there. If you aren't, then you make changes. Right? That's when you start to dig a little bit and you make changes. But it's kind of what do we call that? Like an empirical process. Or inductive. I can't remember the difference between those, deductive and inductive. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you can kind of work backwards. And by the way, that's exactly the same thing we do when we program It's like I can't sit down and tell somebody that comes up to me and is like, hey, what kind of program should I do? I can't sit there and draw up, just looking at their numbers, like draw up the perfect program, right? What happens is I put down something that I know from my experience that's reasonable given their level of advancement, whether they're a beginner or they've been lifting for 8 years or whatever. I put down something that's fairly reasonable starting point, and then I watch and I observe. I see what happens, right? And if they start stalling out in one area, I know I have to make a change to get them to continue to progress, right? That's exactly what we do with programming, and it's the same thing with diet too, right? Is you have a starting point, and then you observe, and then you make changes from there. So this whole idea of like tracking your food, like you said, it's training wheels, but the whole point is not to hit a certain number. The point is to change your habits so that you are getting closer to your goals, whatever they are, whether it's losing body fat or just performing well in the gym or your sport or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that was well said, that one of the biggest pitfalls of tracking your macros is just the fact that like sometimes it distracts you from the actual goal at hand. It's not about hitting X number of grams.
No, those numbers are bullshit anyway.
Because yeah, exactly, right? Like there's so much slop in the data, right? You can't be accurate anyway.
No.
So so I think that's I think that's a good place to leave this off. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think we've beat the hell out of this. So let's close out.
All right.
So thank you for tuning in to the Weights and Plates podcast. Stay tuned. We have more to come. You can find me at _Robert_Santana or weights _and_plates at Instagram.
Yeah, on the Instas. You can find me on the Instas at marmalade_cream. And you can also email me, Trent@marmaladecream.com. That's my audio production company, but I also answer questions about coaching and podcasts and whatever else you want to chat about. Chat about inflation, beef prices. I'm game for anything. All right, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.